So I want to talk about my book, Rise from Darkness, Who Are They and Why I Wrote It. The true reason why I wrote it. And I started writing it in actually on August 5th of 2018. And the direction it went in took a slight bit of a change because of the PSYOP, COVID 1984. And I want to be clear that, when you write very personal things about yourself and your own life experiences, sometimes you're doing it because it's therapy. Sometimes you leave certain things out of embarrassment. But whenever you write something that really shows your vulnerability, even though vulnerability has become somewhat in vogue, people understand it, but many people are still afraid to actually allow themselves to be vulnerable. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, which is what I've done in this book, is it comes from a place or a space of true care and love, actually. And I'm going to talk about, one of the things I talked about in the book, I'm going to talk about it briefly today, is when I nearly died, because love has something to do with that. But what I talk about in the book is something that's very vulnerable, and it's the exact opposite of embarrassment. It comes from a place of true care and love. And I talked about different addictions I had, including a pornography addiction, amongst many things. Now, I went out on Facebook and put that out there, trying to get shock value, to get people, hey, there's this cop is admitting he had a porn problem or whatever. And nowadays, that's just not that big of a deal. Your average age for porn having been viewed nowadays is like 11 years old. I've researched it, and you've probably heard the same thing. But, I talk about it because I believe it's directly involved with some of the social engineering that's going on in the world right now. And, a lot of the porn that I ended up viewing was like female dominance, right? And they almost sucked me in. And psychologically, I can get into those reasons why, but I believe it's part of the mind control and social engineering that these people are trying to do to take over our world. Which is why I realized, hey, you need to tell this. And they're doing that because there's a war on masculinity. They don't want, men that could put up with, they don't want the sacred masculine, which is true care love that's going to actually put up a fight to protect that which they love. You should have seen how I used to clean and wax my Camaro back about 10 years ago, and I had a midlife crisis. I cared about it. You should see how I clean my guns, how I teach martial arts. These are all things I love and care about. And I would live for and die for the women in my life. I'm going to get by the what I would call the subjectification of people in porn, because there's porn out there that's it's not victimizing anybody, and I wasn't watching anything that was victimizing anybody. So from a certain standpoint, I was objectively okay under natural law. Subjectively, in my own morals, I really wasn't. And with part of the social engineering, these people are trying to mind control us. The deep state lost their war in the 80s, man. They lost. The bad guys lost. They learned from their mistakes, and they spent all the 90s and 2000s trying to socially engineer us. Part of that was done through sitcoms where dad's the goofball. Mom's always a smart, tough, strong one who knows what she's doing. And then they start changing the same thing with pornography, and we see the same thing going on, trying to get women to compete against men in combat sports. Okay? In my book, I talk about how my father was actually a homosexual, and he lived most of his life in internalized toxic shame. I talk about the difference between the human condition and human nature. Human nature is, we're born with a blank slate. There is no original sin. That's something religions try and tell you to shame you from the beginning. And see, part of human condition has always been one of slavery and one of internalized, weaponized toxic shame. So this is my message, some of the message in my book, and how natural law wraps up into all this, and where you can go to learn a lot about what's going on in the world. That's in my book also. So I want to be completely honest about what this book's about. In this book, I also talk about how I overcame shame, how I got over addictions and bad habits. What I don't talk about in this book is the relapse that I had, but I'll talk about that in my next book. And that's okay. That's honesty. So, a lot of the stuff that I was seeing, and it also had a lot of satanic symbolisms. Okay? And that's what I'll leave you at that as far as the book's concerned. It's well worth the read. My first book, Violence and Ego, is all about violence and ego. It's all about self-defense and the need for the cessation of ego. That need for the cessation of ego, or that controlling of the ego, is what led me to have the courage to write the second book. And it's also what's leading me to be completely honest now. What's going on in the world is bullshit. I've had psyops work against me. I've served my country. I was a United States Marine during the first Gulf War. I was trained in, we all get basic training in what psyops and propaganda is. It's military. I was infantry, and I was stationed at the U.S. Naval Academy Security Forces. I was trained surveillance and counter-surveillance. I never deployed. Thank goodness I've never murdered somebody in the line of duty for any of the order following jobs I've had. I never was put in a situation. I usually was able to talk people out of stuff. In fact, as a cop, I considered myself a peacekeeper. I besides the very beginning, I wouldn't write little tickets on people. I wasn't trying to mess with people, and I'd get in trouble for that. They wanted me to write tickets. There is a quota. They do want you writing tickets because it's a money-making mechanism. And anyone who says there isn't is fucking full of shit. They're lying to you. They want you to make money for the city, especially when you work for littler cities. There's a lot of stories I could tell. I'm not going to get up here as a former order follower and virtue signal. Okay, I can objectively say in that line of work, I was immoral because of what I understand it to support now. It supports something bad. No human being under nature's creator has a right to control or tell another human being what to do. I talk about that between both these books. Not realizing that the first book that I wrote in 2000 and started writing in 16 and finished in 17 would actually lead the way into what I was searching for and started writing about in 2018. So in 2017, I nearly died, and I want to make sure I tell this story right, because it's very important. The way I want to put this is the problem I had wasn't as bad as their solution, and I was taking every 3 to 4 hours. They had me taking Dilaudid. They had me on muscle relaxers, so my breath was giving in and out of me. And as my breath kept coming and going, there's two different things going on. By the way, I don't know if I've said this. I am clairaudient. Okay, or I like to call myself sometimes clairtarded, because anyone know what clairaudience is? Yeah, I'm not clairvoyant, but I'm clairaudient, and I'm an actual empath, not just somebody who can show empathy. All human beings can show empathy. True empaths usually have a very abusive childhood from somebody they trusted. Okay, I had that. I detail all this in the book. But I'm also clairaudient, so I get impressions from things. Sort of telepathic communications from animals now that I didn't used to get. And this is open to everybody. As soon as you start to spiritually awaken, this will happen. Nature opens to you. You start seeing these things in synchronicities. And so part of being clairaudient is you get impressions and sometimes actually hear things. And I like to call myself clairtarded, because I hear but I don't always listen. That's the ego. But I was in the hospital, I was thinking thoughts, plus I was having some clairaudience go on then that I didn't realize, and I'll get to that part. But the thoughts I was thinking I was 46 years old, and when I was 6, I died. actually died. Clinical death. They had to bring me back. And my breath was giving out here, this was a near-death experience, not an actual death experience. So that I did detail both in the book. As I was sitting there, just thinking to myself, wow, did the 40 years go by quick, man. It went by quick. So I remember not feeling any fear. I remember feeling a lot of regret over being petty, regret over my ego. Because I either ego identified with something that I did, or in most cases, I ego identified with something I hadn't did. Like I wouldn't get promoted, right? So you have these problems that you think are problems, but when you're laying on your deathbed, they're not problems when you think back on them, man. They're just not. And I also remember all I felt was love. There's this overwhelming just feeling of love. And it was a feeling. It was a feeling being imparted on me. It's like that's all that was left. I had to accept I was dying. There was nothing else I could do. So to say that I'm not afraid of death now would be an understatement, because God exists. We go back. We go back, and we will be reincarnated. Some beliefs say 13 times. I'm not going to get into all that now. I might talk a little bit about that in my book. I don't remember, but the main thing that I want to talk about in some of the things I've learned with the esoteric things I've learned from psychics and from researching other people's stuff, this came after I had already become spiritually awakened. So the one thing that I kept, besides the regret, the one thing that I kept hearing it. It wasn't coming from me. This wasn't my own thought. It was only love and discernment are going to drive out hate and fear. Only love and discernment have ever driven out hate and fear. Only love and discernment can drive out hate and fear. And there seems to be very little of those things in the collective right now. And there seems to be a lot of hate and fear. And they want us vibrating at that level of hate and fear. Okay. And I remember I was telling a very young conscious man I don't think I met on accident, who helps me with my school. He's actually part owner. I didn't meet him by accident. Don't think just because you're older you can't learn something from someone much younger. I've learned a lot from him. He learned a lot from me. Always been honest with him. He's always been honest with me. But I remember this is when we first met. I give people permission to be their authentic selves. So he was being, and he asked me, he's like, did you ever regret love? And without hesitating, I told him, no, I regretted not loving more. That's what this fucking book's about. And I talk about the supernatural signs that I've seen and witnessed that can tell you God exists, God with a capital G. And they were supernatural, and I now call them simply natural. Because I want you to keep in mind, science is nothing more than a term that we use to describe a process by which we go about trying to discover the truth not yet known to us in nature. So science equals process. Truth equals nature. And if we don't all start understanding and living in accordance to natural law, which is the solution to the bigger problem in our society, we're going to end up enslaved again. The human condition has been one since the beginning of time, nothing but perpetual human enslavement. We have to start asking ourselves the bigger pictures. Why have we since time immemorial had to fight for our freedom of one kind or another? Why? When under nature's creator, which the Constitution has that part right, we are born free. As far as I'm concerned, we could all, I'm going to get some special toilet paper made. It's going to be special toilet paper that's going to say "We the People" on it. Okay? Because we could wipe our ass with that Constitution as far as I'm concerned. I don't need something scribbled down and written down on some parchment or piece of paper that tells me what my rights are. Your rights have now been codified by man. No, God with a capital G, source consciousness, which is a benevolent, creative source, created my rights in law, in universal law. Our rights, our freedom is our birthright. That right was created by God. And fuck these people. We need to stand up to them 100%. I'm done being inauthentic. Fear stands for forget everything and run or face everything and rise. Ego stands for edging goodness out. Well, I'm not edging goodness out anymore. And I'm going to face everything and rise. That's what we need to do together. Face everything and rise. And rise from this darkness. Together. We need to get angry if we must, but we need to ride together. You return to who you once were. You become who you're supposed to be. You put aside all fear. And you speak even if your voice shakes. I've trained and taught people my whole life until I was able to get over my own bullshit. I couldn't even write the book. Until I really got over my own bullshit, I couldn't speak about it. Well, speaking about it's the most important thing. When we speak, we're casting spells. That's why when you write a word, it's called spelling. They know this. They understand this occulted information. Luckily, there's good people in this world that understand this occulted information, and I've learned from them. I don't have a website with a big body of work, so last time I spoke publicly, I mentioned what on earth is happening. Go to Mark Pascio's website. Look what this man is saying. If we're out of time for you to go and do it. He wants you to look at every single one of his podcasts, and I don't blame him. And I've watched almost all of them. He would ask me probably, why haven't you watched all of them? Well, you're probably not going to have time to watch all of them, but you got 8 hours. He did a whole thing on what natural law and the true law of attraction is, and it's a little over 8-hour presentation, and it's out there widely available. Watch it. He's spilling the beans on these people, man. He's fucking spilling the beans on them. Once we understand this and put this out into the collective, they're done. Who are they? That's why the book's called Rise from Darkness. Who are they? Because I rose from darkness when I found out who they were. This is my message. This will be my eternal message. And before every human being, before God, the Lord of Spirits, I have spoken not my truth, but I have spoken the truth. Because truth is knowable. And it's objective. That's something else they don't want you to know. They want you to think that morals are subjective. Well, I've got subjective morals that I felt I was very moral about, but objectively, I was only immoral while I did that job. I am no longer immoral. I bring no harm to any other human being. None. We have to understand that our rights were created by God, and any action we take that does not bring harm to another being is a right to do, and therefore moral. Any action we take that initiates harm against another being, including lying and being coercive, which is what they're doing to us with this fucking psyop, that is immoral and wrong. So this is going to be a 20-minute voice presentation. This is going to be a 20-minute voice presentation. I'm under 20 minutes right now. I wasn't going to put this out there. I was just practicing. Fuck that. This is going out there. This is going to be my next podcast. It's just my voice. But I will say this publicly to anybody. We need to rise from darkness together. As soon as we unite, they're done. We are the many. They are the few. We are definitely the children of light. We are the mythic warriors of the rainbow, the 144,000 that the Book of Revelations talks about. And our job is to raise the consciousness of the rest of humanity. Just 1%, which will raise everyone else. 1% 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 which will raise everyone else A little over 20 minutes. Anyway, this is Dan coming at you, man. This is probably going to be my final Tac Chat. All I'm going to do is publicly speak from this point. Unless I really get some technical stuff going on with the podcast. Anyways, one love, man.